Hi everyone, welcome to our focus group, how to securely improve your digital capabilities with Cisco Meraki. So I'm James, the e-commerce manager here at Charities Digital, and I'll be your host for today's session. So I thought it would be good to start with a bit of context about Charities Digital's mission for those of you who may not know. So Charities Digital are a charity that help other charities increase their impact by being more digital. So we have two primary charitable activities. So we provide access to software products that charities need at dramatically reduced prices. We also publish content, so articles, podcasts, and videos, and run webinars and events that educate charity professionals and volunteers on how to make better use of digital tools and technologies. So we're proud to say that we've helped over 1 million charity professionals learn about digital transformation and improve their digital skills through content on our website, events, and training, and have enabled over 77,000 charities to save in excess of £284 million on their technology investments. So that's where our partnership with Cisco comes in. So Cisco have a donation program where organizations can access top-of-the-range hardware at a fraction of the cost. There are various items available at the moment through the Charity Digital Exchange, and these lines are reviewed and new ones released constantly, so always keep an eye. So today we're joined by Eric, John, and Patrick from Cisco, who will highlight the challenges the charities face associated with cybersecurity, device management, connectivity, physical security, and environmental monitoring, and how to combat these issues. So before I hand over to our speakers, I just want to share a few house rules and pointers for today's session. So the session is being recorded and will be uploaded to watch on demand within a week's time. The slides and other resources will also be made available to you, so don't worry if you missed anything. If there's any links that are in the chat, we'll send all of that around later on. Closed captions are available for today's session, so to enable these, in the bottom of the Zoom window, click the up arrow button next to closed caption and do show subtitle. During the webinar, please ask loads of questions in the chat box for Eric, John, and Patrick to address at the end of the presentation, or if it's relevant, I'll ask them on the slide that they're on, and feel free to share any other comments, experiences, or top tips in the chat section. Once the session ends, you will be prompted for feedback, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can continue to help your organization, so please take a few minutes just to share your thoughts. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Eric.
Thank you, James. Is my audio coming across okay?
Yes, perfect.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you all, and thank you very much for having myself, Patrick, and John Henry on your webinar. And I was just looking at the chats of the different charities that have joined us, and I just wanted to mention that Fahim, the Afghan Community Center and Welfare Center, not only was my first job here at Cisco in the crisis response group, participating in deploying networks for what we call Operation Afghan Welcome, which was the U.S. resettlement effort. But I also am a member of a jobs training program here at Cisco to help support the Afghan refugee population here in tech jobs, right? And so we try to do some measure of counseling. So it's really nice to see these charities join, and I hope this is quite useful for you today. So perhaps we should do a bit of an introduction first. And Patrick and John, maybe we could do a brief introduction of yourself. My name is Eric Knudsen, and I lead technology strategy and solutions for the crisis response group here at Cisco, where we endeavor to connect underserved communities and help populations prepare for and recover from natural disasters. That's the role that I'm in. Maybe I can pass over to you, Patrick, and you can introduce yourself as well.
Yeah. So my name is Patrick. I'm based in Belgium, and I take care of the operational aspect of Cisco's charitable product granting programs worldwide. We have both direct and indirect programs, and I'm the first point of contact if you have any questions regarding those at Cisco. Over to John.
Morning or good afternoon, depending upon where you're dialing in from. My normal day job is a systems engineer looking after the UK service providers for the Meraki portfolio of Cisco. And my other role at Cisco is one of the volunteers from the crisis response. So I've worked with Patrick and Eric on various different initiatives for Cisco and the humanitarian response sector. So I have an understanding of active deployments, and I have done some active deployments with the Meraki gear in a crisis response scenario.
Absolutely. John Henry, thank you. And Patrick, thank you. And we'll kind of change, each take a different aspect of the briefing. I will run some slides today and perhaps lead the discussion. James, I know you'll be taking Q&A. We've got quite a bit of time. Perhaps you can lob in some questions that are relevant to maybe the slides, especially if they help give us an opportunity to explain better what we're talking about here. Patrick represents our product grant program, and John Henry is our product expert here and will lead us in a demonstration of some of this technology after we run through some slides. So, securely digitize your charity with Cisco Meraki is the topic for today. Cisco Meraki products, you may know about them, you may not. Cisco has many products. I mean, it's a product catalog that's very, very thick, right? It's like an encyclopedia. But Meraki is one of our exciting newer product families, and one that we use quite a bit. I use every day in my mission for humanitarian connectivity. We've deployed quite a bit of it to connect refugees, nonprofits and NGOs, volunteer organizations, as more and more of their program delivery is done digitally. So hopefully we take you through a few things of interest today. So a bit of a cybersecurity and Meraki platform focus today. So I'll take you through security challenges, some solutions that you might need, you might consider. There may be situations in which only a networking solution provides an answer to a particular problem. We'll talk about just kind of secure networking in general, and then some of the firewalls and other products that we've got, and that should segue into a product demo that John Henry will do. So, compared to the way, from an IT perspective, we used to connect users and organizations, 10, 20 years ago. We could depend on four walls. Right nowadays, and in many of the cases when I have a consulting conversation with a charity, users are everywhere, and people work from their homes most of the time, or they work while they're on vacation in Morocco, for example. So understanding the users, where they're at and where they're connecting to, right? They're not necessarily connecting to like a private server that you might have. They're connecting to the cloud primarily, whether it's a Zoom meeting like this, or whether it's something that's hosted within an environment like AWS or Microsoft Azure, for example. Behind every connection, there is a threat, right? And I hate to use alarming language like that, but I think the thing is that ransomware has become a tremendous moneymaker for cybercrime, if you will, and we have to be careful about what we allow our users to connect to. And of course, there's a training component of that, right? But then there are also systems that you can put in place to help prevent a breach, right? So some of these stats I've pulled from our kind of small and medium business, because we don't necessarily have a ton of stats regarding charities, right, and getting data from these charities. Perhaps our friends in NetHope, which was a charity that Cisco helped found about 25 years ago, would have been a great place for me to look. Next time, James, right? Next time. But, right, 61% of businesses, and these are small and medium businesses, could not operate after a data breach or a cyber attack. In many ways, it's because their data has been locked up, right? There's been crypto lockered, right? And that kind of a thing. Or maybe there's a reputational risk, or they just got to pack it up. Most of the cyber attacks hit larger organizations that have maybe the ability to pay out. But what I've observed over the years is that so much cyber activity from a malware and a malicious threat actor perspective is just automated, right? It's automated. They don't care. They're not necessarily targeting you directly, but you need to protect yourself, right? This is just like putting on a jacket before it rains, or pulling an umbrella, right? The number one IT priority globally is improving their cybersecurity, right? And I think that one thing too, when I look at the charities that we support, especially from my group in crisis response, many of our beneficiaries, or the end beneficiaries, are some of the most vulnerable people that are out there, right? And so that I think we have a duty to try to protect the users at the charity or NGO, and then their beneficiaries as much as possible, because in many cases, right, they are, again, the most vulnerable people, and they're already disadvantaged as it is. So one thing that I'll say, as someone who's been a technician, a systems engineer, or a systems administrator over the years, over the decades, while I had hair, is that complexity creates insecurity, right? So you need all of these capabilities here that are on the screen to really have a secure operation, if you will, right? So consider every environment, right? Understand that if you operate in multiple locations, there may be a way for you to put security in multiple locations, or you may need to consider something like a host-based solution, right? Meaning, like, I can put a solution on a laptop, or I can make sure that a laptop or a user is always connected to the firewall in some form or fashion, perhaps using a VPN, right? That sort of a thing. Having inconsistent policy down in the bottom left creates challenges, right? It creates, obviously, inconsistencies, right? But if you have many, many products that you're using that don't necessarily speak to each other from a management perspective, right? So this is kind of a technical perspective here, an IT administration perspective. It can make it challenging for you to protect personally identifying information, PII, make sure your data privacy controls are up to snuff, for example. And so it's very helpful to have the capability of, right, having a single dashboard, right? And John Henry will show you the single dashboard that we use to administer and to manage all of our solutions that you'll see on these slides, and create consistency in policy and consistency in capability. And that really, I think, addresses not only the policy sprawl problem here, but also the management complexity problem in the upper right corner. So what term that we use in kind of normal business consulting is this concept called lean IT. And I use it daily in my role as a solutions architect internal to Cisco, meaning that lean IT is one where you don't have the resource in order to have a large IT team, or sometimes even a dedicated IT person at all. And so the concept of lean IT means not doing wasteful work, right? There's lots of technical gotchas and specific activities that you need to do to manage certain legacy systems, ways that you have to update the firmware that are different than others, or ways that you cannot update the firmware, right? Because it's a legacy thing and nobody makes the software anymore, that sort of a thing. And so reducing complexity, I think, is a powerful ability, not only in our business, my business, on a day-to-day basis, doing humanitarian networking, but also for your charity as well, right? Reducing complexity, making it easy to keep your products up to date from like a software perspective, making it easy for you to manage the configurations, right, without using a special cable to plug into this device and a special program in order to access the device and configure your firewall. That's a tremendous, tremendous advantage to using the Meraki product set, which will show you. It's all run through your browser, right? And then finally, the evolving threat landscape. These devices that we'll talk about, the firewalls, the Wi-Fi access points, and perhaps, James, at some point you can show a bit of the catalog, right? They all connect to our cloud platform, which is available globally, and they keep themselves up to date, right? They're constantly getting a feed of what we call threat intelligence, meaning, antivirus updates, right? New sites and new activities and new behaviors to block because we've determined that they're malicious, right? So all of these products will continue to update themselves, and I think that that's a tremendous differentiator here. So connectivity, security, fundamental, right? And sometimes I'll get on a call and people will talk about AI. Of course, AI is the topic du jour, and they forget, right, that basic connectivity and security are fundamental to accessing any of these capabilities. Even in our work with charities such as World Central Kitchen, for example, they depend on having connectivity in order for them to manage their own staff, their volunteers, to pull in food into the zone that they're in. So they need good access to things like Zoom or email, for example, right? So I think that it's important to ensure that your connectivity and your security, not only do you have foundational and perhaps even advanced capabilities through Charity Digital, but that you acknowledge that it's how you deliver your services, right? Everything is digital these days, whether it's a banking transaction, whether it's a pharmacy, prescription, for example, for medicine. And these are the types of problems that we've seen in disaster zones, right? Is that people don't have access to these things because the digital capability to transact, even do small transactions, don't exist. And so, right, so let's talk about this secure networking platform that I've hinted at for a few minutes. So our Meraki platform, again, the way that you access it is a web browser. So you see this little laptop with a web browser on it, but it allows you to view, manage, and control all of the products that you see below it, right? That could be Wi-Fi, and I won't go into all of the different access points and so on, and because those will all be available on the Charity Digital site. The switches, right? Those are the network devices that you plug the cables into, as well as software such as MDM, mobile device management, we call it endpoint management. And there's a capability within Systems Manager that allows you to control laptops and enroll your phones and things of that nature. If you have staff that have like organizational phones, and you can just make sure that the software is current. That's really, some of the base foundational capability that you can use in endpoint management software. We'll talk a bit about secured networking here in the second column, security and SD-WAN. If you're a very, very, very large organization, you might care about SD-WAN, or software-defined WAN, which is essentially the ability to connect your multiple locations over the internet using a private tunnel is the way that we call it, right? A bit like the cup and strings over the internet. But we'll talk mainly about just foundational security as opposed to SD-WAN and Secure Connect, a way to connect securely to different cloud environments and your users connect into them. Lob us a question if any of these things are of interest. The Meraki platform also has cellular gateways for backup or even your primary connection. There's a charity that I support, which is about in the US, and of course I'm in the US, is about helping people vote, right? Because that's a tremendously important thing. And so they use these cellular gateways at their various festivals and fairs that they go to in order to connect in, provide a bit of Wi-Fi so that they can enroll people on their tablets and their iPads, right? And so that's a capability that you might not consider, right? Is having something that's mobile or you can use in a wireless fashion. We've got other capabilities here, Duo, which is your multi-factor authentication. That's extremely important these days, right? Not just having a password and a username for certain websites. If you have the ability to enroll into a multi-factor authentication, or MFA, or two-factor, that's another way of saying it, for any web platform that you use, I suggest you do it. Absolutely. And if there's a requirement for you to do it, for your own applications, Duo would be a way for you to provide that kind of capability to your organization. Credential theft happens all the time, right? Especially if some threat actor gets access to an email, they might be able to grab a password and reuse that everywhere. Having multi-factor authentication allows you to provide an extra method of saying, right, this is me logging in, and it uses your phone, right? So even if somebody has your password, right, your phone lights up and you're able to allow your login. And that's a way for you to keep your platforms secure, even if somebody steals your password. So one way of doing it there. And of course, we have clients, which is the Cisco Secure client for VPN, Cisco Secure Endpoint for antivirus and anti-malware. James, I don't know if these are available yet through Charity Digital, but perhaps you could consider prioritizing them at some point, because anti-malware and antivirus are extremely important, and we do provide some of these things. One thing Patrick just shared with me before this call, a great new video from a food bank in Belgium, where we were able to provide cameras and environmental sensors. We do this globally, and physical security is such a concern, not only for things like food, but in many cases, if you're providing sheltering, the physical security of your staff and monitoring, right, who's coming and going. That's extremely important. Meraki has a great camera line that are tremendously useful, and you just manage this all from your same web browser, right, that you see in the upper right. Oh, and as we're talking about environmental sensors next, you can see there's a bit of a chart that looks just like the environmental sensor chart. And you can see if you put one of these sensors in like a refrigerated area, for example, whether it's for food reasons or whether it's for medicine, right, to keep cold, we're able to monitor, right, the temperature, the humidity, right, even see things like volatile organic compounds, right, or VOCs, to just ensure that, hey, right, it's a good environment to breathe. We've got a sensor type that has a small cable that trails down to the ground, and it is a leak detection sensor, right? These types of capabilities are quite useful, not only to make sure that, hey, if you have some equipment there, it doesn't flood, right? But if you're holding on to stock like food or medicines or other things that need to maintain some level of temperature, you can ensure that with these sensors there, as well as the cameras. And if you have a sensor trigger fire off, and John Henry, I don't know if you'll be able to show this or not, but I think that this is quite neat because I do use this in my day job. When environmental sensor goes off because perhaps the temperature is too high, I have a sensor that's just tied to a camera that's looking at that area, and I can kind of see what's going on. So I click on the alert, and then it just pops the camera view, and I can see like, okay, right, it's just somebody left the door open, and it's too hot in this environment. Or really, at this time of year, somebody left the door closed. And then moving on to the APIs and ecosystem on the right, it's really strange to think about networking products and security products, cybersecurity products, having a Meraki marketplace or the marketplace. It's like an app store where you can connect in these networks with other third-party offers out there, where, for example, you can access software that looks at the camera feed and says, right, I'm going to detect that that's a specific type of object. Oh, great. And you care about that object type. Maybe that represents, I don't know, a vehicle counting application. And if you're counting the vehicles that come down a specific road, after you hit a certain number, maybe you do an activity, and you're able to use cameras for things more than just basic security, right? You can use these to help digitize some workflows that may be very labor intensive, whether it's with internal staff or you have to get volunteers. For one of our missions, for example, I was interested in using cameras to detect certain trucks because that represented water that was going into a refugee camp. And for some of our folks in the United Nations, they were very interested in understanding, like, right, how do we reduce cost by only having the water trucks come when it's necessary, right? Or fuel trucks too, right? Propane and cooking fuels in some of the refugee camps that we work in. And so we're able to use cameras to detect specific types of objects and software to then identify those. And that really ultimately ties into the Meraki APIs that you see there. And of course, we can have more of a technical conversation, if any of the questions are interested in that. So I hate to say,
ask a quick question? Just
go ahead.
Whilst
Sure.
that slide is done. So Lewis said, we currently use Cisco Umbrella. Could you say what the difference is between that and Cisco Meraki, please?
Sure. So Umbrella is what we call our domain name system security suite. Well, it does a lot more than that, but that's one of the main capabilities that people leverage, right? So Cisco Umbrella allows you to, when you put in a website into your browser, for example, that could be google.com. You have your computers and your phones and any digital device essentially has to access the Umbrella platform in order to find out what the actual IP address is, right? The numbers that you typically will see, 111.111.111.111, so on. And the Umbrella platform is a software platform that exists globally as well, and it helps protect you and your users from going to malicious sites via your browser or any other application that needs to use the domain name system, which is actually quite a bit. One user during the day might represent 1,000 DNS queries. That's a strange fact that I've seen with my wife and I at our home, because I have Umbrella applied at our home as well. Now, what Meraki does, it allows you to tie the Umbrella service from the web into your network, right? So Meraki is not only a control point, and stop me if I get too technical, James, but it's not only a control point, but it also provides you the ability to tie into other cybersecurity platforms like Umbrella. One other way that I can say this, the Meraki platform gives you a tremendous amount of control and capability for the network that it builds, right? And that could be at an office location, that could be even at a home if you use a small Meraki networking device to help secure a home. But the Umbrella platform exists globally, and you can utilize that using an application, a roaming application on your laptop, or even on your Android or iOS devices to help secure your users and your organization. They both complement each other, and they both have very similar capabilities. And if we have to go further, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you on the side regarding the differences between those platforms.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So why trust Cisco? Well, I mean, I hate to have this type of, it's like a little bit of a marketing slide, but I think these are great points to raise because they're key to this conversation, right? From a protect perspective, we have not only industry leading, but we have a gigantic threat intelligence organization called Talos. And I say gigantic because I think it's got 250 people working there. Now, Talos, I've got friends that work there. They provide all of the intelligence feeds that power our products and the platforms like Meraki, for example, right? And that means that they're keeping track of these threat actors that are deploying malware out there or intentionally trying to wipe your data or freeze communications technology, whether they're nation state actors from Russia or China, or they're just common cyber criminals, right? Quite a useful capability to have. Our scalability and the ability to take that threat intelligence and deploy it everywhere is pretty much unmatched. We're a giant company with tons of products delivered through Charity Digital and TechSoup. And as I was talking about lean IT, we have a way to simplify the ability to deploy that, the ability to use that and operate that, right? With our converged physical security, cybersecurity, and networking solutions. You'll see them all wrapped up in a bow when John Henry pops his screen and shows you the Meraki dashboard. So as I was mentioning, Cisco Talos, gigantic organization. I said 250, well, over 250. I guess that means 500 threat researchers is still accurate, right? Keeping you safe from malicious actors. So you can see on the left, we've got a little bit of a graphic depicting the Talos threat intelligence feed going into the Meraki MX, and that is the firewall that we use. And as I mentioned, those products are constantly getting updates for their firewall, their IDS and IPS, which is an intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system, their content filtering feeds, right? You might block things like gambling, for example, but we're keeping that gambling content group updated, right, with new websites and new platforms that you don't have to manage, right? It's all just being done automatically, as well as advanced malware protection, right? So if you don't have the ability to put some sort of an antivirus or anti-malware client on a laptop or on a phone, because perhaps this is for a guest network, or perhaps because the way that you operate is everybody brings their own devices that they own personally to the organization. Well, you can provide protections using an MX, right? Instead, you've created a safe environment, right? A safer space for all of those devices to operate in when you don't have the ability to deploy anything on the actual device itself. We do that all the time in my role in humanitarian networking. 20 billion threats blocked daily, and that's not a marking number. It's absolutely gigantic. 550 billion security events analyzed daily, and it's partially because not only do we have these MX security devices checking and then providing updates to the cloud, or just at least sharing that, hey, right, there's some new security threat, right? But we also have devices and capabilities that our partners in the service providers, right, your internet service providers, we're checking their environments, and as they're moving a tremendous amount of data, we're getting feeds from them that enhance our ability to secure the rest of our users, right? And that's globally. I've seen things where we have a malicious activity in one theater, and as people are waking up and the day is progressing through the rest of the world, other countries around the world are getting the updates to their devices, right? Just because we have this cloud connection. It's amazing. 98% of malware threats blocked. Sounds great to me, but it's quite good. Let me assure you. And we have some of the test results if you're terribly interested. And I took some notes here. 9 million emails blocked per hour, right? We do quite a bit of email security. 2,000 malware samples processed per minute. And then maybe something that's a little more umbrella specific, 2,000 malicious domains blocked per second. Can you imagine? There's no way that you could manage this stuff manually, right? You just depend a bit on an automated feed. So regarding scalability, I've mentioned some of these points already. Security everywhere. You have people working everywhere. Well, we have solutions that we can provide, whether they're through the Meraki platform or whether they're through like the Umbrella platform, for example, to provide you security and control, no matter where your users are at, whether they're at a headquarters office or a country office or working from a home or a coffee shop, for example. And John Henry will show you some of the visibility that you get out of the Meraki platform. And I think that that's fundamental to running securely. Understanding what is connected allows you to at least have a thought regarding, should that be connected? Why is it, is it doing a malicious, activity? Should I have this smart refrigerator on a different network from the rest of my users, right? That sort of a thing. So having intelligent insights and visibility into your network is terribly important. And then end-to-end assurance. So as you depend more upon things like cloud capabilities, right? Assurance is the ability for you to look at, right, my users are complaining about an issue and it's really not my network, it's not the ISP, it's literally Zoom. Zoom is having the problem, right? And so the Meraki platform gives you the ability to say, like, right, these applications may specifically be having a problem, and you have to manage that in a different way than what it would be if you thought your actual network was a problem. And then I'll just briefly mention simplified network operations. I think the demo with John will show you some of these things: centralized management, fast configuration, rapid threat detection. One of the things that I will mention that is quite useful is zero-touch deployment. All of these devices, they attach to the cloud, they get the configurations and their threat feeds from the cloud, for example. And so you can order some of these things through Charity Digital, get the order confirmation, and literally set everything up through the web browser before it even arrives, right? Or if you drop ship it to a different office, for example, you can set it all up before it even arrives at the remote office. And when they plug it in, it pulls down its configuration and it's ready to go. So zero-touch deployment, it's great, and it allows you to help scale your operation, right? You don't have to send an IT person or a technologist to some of these other locations if you need to deploy a firewall remotely. So just briefly about the actual firewalls themselves, I feel like I've gone on and on. Layer 3 and Layer 7 stateful firewall, these are the base kind of capabilities that every firewall needs to provide. The intrusion detection and intrusion prevention capability there, malware protection, URL filtering, right? So if you don't have the ability to kind of filter websites out, you will, should you use one of these. We have the SD-WAN capability, which again is really for larger organizations. But you may have an organization that has many small offices. You need to connect them together securely to share your data. SD-WAN might be a capability that you're interested in. We can support up to 4 different connections in there. Maybe you want to run 2 internet service providers, or perhaps maybe you want to have one of those cellular gateways backing up an office because it's so critical that the users there stay connected and secured through that network. So they can support many internet connections. Dedicated remote worker gateway, so that would be that tiny firewall at the top, for example. It's got Wi-Fi built right into it, and we did talk about LTE capabilities. So I think it's clear to say that we feel that this is a platform that is unrivaled for security, efficacy, and SD-WAN capability, and the fastest threat protection. As I've mentioned, you're getting threat feeds from your global environments, or even our global environment. So it doesn't matter if customer A has seen some malicious activity. Everybody else gets the benefit from the solution once the solution is deployed, and a lower total cost of ownership. I was thinking about, right, should we talk about TCO? So many of these products will be sold or even granted, at a low cost. Well, even free things cost money if you have to spend a significant amount of time managing them, right? So I did want to just mention that. Industry-leading protection, Meyercom is the organization that does many of our tests, and I think that's it from a slide perspective here. Oh, right. Let me at least share some of the kind of testimonials that we have from other charities, right? Daily ease of use is great. I can do my tasks from my cell phone. That's true. You can literally use the browser on your phone to maybe execute a few tasks. We even have a Meraki app that you can download, which is pretty amazing. Single pane of glass for our network, endpoints, wireless access, and environmental sensors is a big benefit for a small team, right? Just a single place to go to, Meraki.com, you're able to see all of these things. Small teams that must always be flexible, right? Meraki helps us stay on top of issues from the dashboard, not having to do everything via CLI, right? And CLI means command line interface. It's a bit like that old Matthew Broderick film regarding war, where you see hackers and they log in to a terminal. It's a bit of a green screen and you have to issue commands, very technical tasks. All of this stuff is done via a web page, and I think you'll see that here in a moment. The Meraki MT, and that's the sensor line, brings peace of mind. We use our leak detector to protect historical archives that have experienced more than one flood. I think that could be a key capability as we're seeing more and more severe weather. So just some testimonials. I hope they're relevant. I hope they resonate. And if there are any questions, as John Henry goes through the product demo, I'd be happy to answer them from the Q&A then. So with that, James, point of order, are we moving forward with that, or do we want to field a few questions?
All good. John Henry has been very useful answering the questions in the chat. So I believe all of those have been answered. So I think we can move on.
Great. Excellent.
So much for that, Eric.
Certainly. All right, I will stop sharing. Thank you, John, for taking care of the Q&A. I can't see that when you're doing the slides, right?
All good, all good. So over to me now, I take it. Okay, cool.
Indeed.
Let's see. Come on, computer. So, got a few different tabs to open. Okay, can you see my screen all right? Should be sharing now.
Not quite yet.
I'll share again. Right,
there we are.
Now you should be.
Yeah,
there we go. Lovely.
Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, so just for those of you where there's a lot of information that you've been hit with, this website here, for anyone who's interested in knowing more about specific products in the Meraki portfolio, is publicly accessible. We're mainly going to focus on security and SD-WAN because that's been the nature of the conversation today, but there are other products on the Meraki platform, and we call it a platform because you can have an individual product from Meraki in combination with other devices, and by that I mean use open protocols. So in realistic speaking terms, you may have switches that are only a couple of years old, but you're looking to upgrade your edge with a firewall, or maybe you just bought a firewall, but you want to get the benefits of Meraki switches or access points. So exclusively when you use all of the products together, it works better because you get more end-to-end visibility and integrations. But in practical terms, that's not always realistic to be able to do that. So for those of you interested in knowing more, if you click into these, it will take you to the individual products where you can start to see more about the specific hardware models. I'm not going to focus too much time on hardware models today. The Talos website, for those of you interested in knowing more about Talos, is also publicly facing. So if you just search Cisco Talos, this is where you can find out about what they're doing. Interestingly, this is a threat they've detected specifically targeting human rights activists in North Africa. And somebody's asking around what level of involvement does Talos have with governments and such forth. It's limited in what I can say, but to give an example of when Talos has been involved with governments, heavily involved in protecting the national infrastructure in Ukraine, various from the national grid and different aspects there. So they publish certain information on what they're doing. Obviously, given the nature of what they're doing, it is limited in sometimes what they can publish. Another example of information sharing in cybersecurity is there was a vulnerability in wireless called Crack quite a few years ago. That was detected by researchers at university before anyone else knew about it. They shared that with the cybersecurity industry. Talos and some of the other agencies were able to produce a patch before it was publicly announced. So the Meraki devices had a patch from day one when this was announced as a public vulnerability. So that gives you an example of some of the work they're doing behind the scenes. And if you're interested in knowing more, you can find out from there on these websites. Now, coming into the Meraki portfolio and the actual dashboard, this is our global footprint of active networks around the world. It's not an infection map. This is green Meraki networks for different locations that Meraki is active. And we're pretty much everywhere now. And then I'm going to be using our corporate network today. So our corporate network is real offices. These aren't simulated locations. These aren't synthetic traffic. These are real physical buildings. So if you've never seen a dashboard before, green is good, amber is a warning, red is something's probably offline or broken. So it's a traffic light system. And on the left-hand side, you always have two columns. The monitor is to view devices and the configure is to make configurations. Meraki's mission statement is to simplify things. So it doesn't mean we're going to give you 100 different configuration options and lots of different things. We're going to try and make it as streamlined as possible because what most people are looking for is operational efficiency and the absolutely essential features that you need to get you up and running. And the thing I can't demo to you today, because I'm virtual and this is a virtual session, is the zero touch piece. So there isn't a pre-staging required with Meraki devices. If you have internet at a location and you plug this device into the back of the router, it will automatically try to connect to dashboard and put its configuration down. There is no pre-staging. So we have people send these boxes out to the field without ever touching IT team's hands. So I'm calling you from, well, I'm not actually in London, but normally I'm based in London. So I want to have a look at what's going on in London. I click on the London tab here, which will take us to view. So on the left-hand side, we see London. And this is built automatically for you. You don't need to configure this visibility. This is all pre-populated, showing you basically what's been happening at this site today, what traffic we've consumed, what type of clients are connected, to see wireless or wired. Because we're using .1x authentication of Active Directory, I can see how they've authenticated onto the network. And just to give you an idea of the visibility you get, if I wanted to click on one of these clients, like a wireless user, we start to see this blue dot as the wireless user. Because we've got multiple Meraki access points, we can triangulate their location to give you an approximate area. And we've uploaded a floor plan so we can see where in the office they are sat, roughly. And because we're using the Meraki full stack, which means Meraki switches, wireless, core switch, and security appliance, we see the experience of the user. So this, again, is pre-populated. You don't need to configure this view. As I said, this is providing you as a network team or the admin team easy visibility into where the problem could be. We see their signal strength. We can see what applications they're using. If we wanted to block certain things, you can do so. Under connections and performance, you'll see how they got onto the Wi-Fi, what the performance, or actually we'll go to the roaming one because this is an interesting one to look at for roaming or load. So this user roaming is problematic with Wi-Fi because depending upon how Wi-Fi is installed, it can affect the actual Wi-Fi experience. So what this shows you is how this user has moved between different access points. The reason they moved is because of signal strength and the duration of how long they're connected. So if you start to have bad Wi-Fi, this is a useful page to look at. And again, everything I've shown you, this is day zero configuration. This visibility and viewing is pre-populated by Meraki. And if we want to look at, say, an individual access point, so this is the access point that that user was connected to. So on the MR56, I can see the number of clients connected. I can have a look at details like how the channel levels are looking, the visibility, and I can even go into, say, I want to look at port 7. So that's the Meraki switch that this AP is connected to. And when I click on that, it takes me to a port. I've used a different switch just for illustration purposes, but now I can see this port. And there's tools and dashboard, such as running a cable test. Now, because I'm on a production network on a demo account, it's not going to let me do this, but remotely you can run a physical cable test on a Meraki switch. So you don't need to send your IT team to a remote location potentially just to see if the cable has been disconnected or if the cable has been damaged. So this is just to illustrate to you some of the remote troubleshooting tool and visibility tools from the dashboard that are provided without you having to do very much configuration. I'll move over to more the security features because that's kind of the focus for today, which is the security in SD-WAN or the MX box, as Eric has been referring to it. So again, you have left-hand side when you want to monitor the physical box and the right-hand side when you do configurations. And this is neither a router nor firewall. It is what we call a UTM, Unified Threat Management, which means it wears both hats. So it can do your IP addressing. It can do VPN and SD-WAN in a very, very easy way. We're going to focus on the firewalling. I mentioned on the chat, you can do traffic shaping. So if you want to throttle certain applications, prioritize certain applications, because everyone has a limited bandwidth from the ISP they're paying for. So you can do that as well. So we're going to focus on the firewall, threat protection, content filtering. So by default, it's a stateful firewall, which means it blocks outbound, blocks connections from the outside world unless a client that was behind the firewall started the connection. So that's its like default position. On the firewalling page, you've got some fairly standard things. You can do like ACLs where you can select any and deny. There's also layer 7. So you can do countries. If there's a country you have no interest in doing business with, North Korea tends to be a very common one that people select. That's one option if you want to block peer-to-peer. And we use the NBAR2 engine, which gives about 14,000 applications to fingerprint and choose from. So you can deny layer 7, or you can just do a specific URL. So that's like the basic firewalling of the MX on layer 3 and layer 7. Then you have content filtering. Now, this particularly for providing public Wi-Fi, or even just your normal corporate network with your normal internal employees. You're probably going to be putting in some filtering in here. Things such as, where is it? Pornography, gambling. These tend to be the most common things that people block. So effectively now blocking those categories. If, for example, you had an exception where there was a certain website you wanted to say from the auction website allow, you can whitelist things as well. So if I go to ebay.com, I'm now effectively saying all auction sites are barred except for the eBay one, which they can access. So you can do some quite tailored filtering. And on a slightly newer firmware, along with blocking generic website categories, there's also malicious website categories. So botnets, there's an additional option down here where you can select websites that are explicitly malicious and filter those out there. On the threat protection, and this, by the way, this engine that's pulling in these website categories is coming from Umbrella. So somebody's asking around what's the relationship between Umbrella and Meraki. Meraki provides physical hardware, and then we can pull in different information from Umbrella. So the categorizations of websites comes from Umbrella on the MX. We have threat protection, and this is turning on IDS and IPS. What used to be known as the Sourcefire engine or Snort is based off this engine, and that's what runs on the MX. And we also have IDS and IPS. So at the moment on here, it's turned to disabled. You can either do detection and prevention, and then the rule sets as balanced, and you can change this. And when you change that, it's effectively setting the tolerance of how severe a risk has to be before you let it in or be detected. And you'll see again, there is an option to integrate Umbrella. So if you have Umbrella, you can pull the DNS part of Umbrella directly onto the MX. And then at the top here, you've got AMP, which is advanced malware protection. So again, this is allowing you to detect on malware files that people can potentially accidentally open. If the specific URLs you want to allow through that don't want to be scanned, you can set that there. Now, all these features that I've shown you have been done on the London network. You may be that you want to tailor these to different groups of users. So you have something called a group policy. And in a group policy, you can define different level of settings for different groups of users on the same site. And that can be applied via VLAN, that can be applied via Active Directory, that can be applied a couple of different ways. So it doesn't have to be manually. So you can have differentiated levels of service on a network. Now, I won't cover it today in the interest of time, and because you could dedicate another session potentially to this, which is something called Secure Connect. Most of you will have heard the word SASE, that Gartner came up with and pushing heavily at the moment. But Secure Connect is a newer product from Meraki, which is the merging of Umbrella directly into Dashboard. So what you see here is the ability to create endpoint posture profiles, different DNS profiles, data loss prevention, CASB, cloud firewall, private application access, remote access log. So this is effectively merging Meraki and Umbrella together and allowing you to push out different controls to different end users, particularly when you've got a lot of remote users. That's what this section you see here is Secure Connect, which is becoming more and more common requests from people. When you turn on security features, you have what's known as a security center. So in this view here, because it's on the organization tab, we see all the locations, not just London, not just USA, for example. We see the different networks highlighted here. We can see different types of threat risks that have been detected. We can see the client that's been affected. And if I click on view client details, if you want to do remediation or mitigation on that client, for example, you can click on view this client details. When that loads in a minute, you'll be able to actually do a different couple of reactions to it. We can see the location of where this threat is coming from. we can see the most prevalent types of threats. And if we're not sure what that means, you can come into here and go rule details, and that will open up the Snort database, which will then give you more information around what does an Apache log 4 actually mean, because I don't know what that means. So I need to go and have a look at what that is. Other things that you can look at is the different types of detections that we see across the network. So it's giving you a single page. Now this can be scheduled, and there's also automatic alerts. So if you want this on a weekly thing to your IT manager, or if you have a CISO, or if you just want a proactive alarm when this gets detected, you can have the dashboard send an alarm. That can be to an email, or if you have some type of generic monitoring system, you can ingest it into there. On the client page, it's taking a bit of a while, but effectively on clients, what you can do, if I go back to this client I had earlier, in this policy here, you can actually block. You see, go see IT. And that will be enforced on the Meraki MX, and this person's on London network. So that's how you can do some remediation from when a threat is detected on my client automatically in the click of a few buttons. And as I say, I'm not actually in London at the moment, but I'm controlling the whole network remotely. That goes through to Snort database there. The other one, before I move over to sensors, where is it? The firmware upgrades page. Here we go. Firmware upgrades. Semi-linked to security, because what hackers are increasingly doing is going after legacy networking devices that aren't patched, because traditionally patching a network device used to be a bit of a taboo. It was almost a badge of honor to have a switch running on the network for 12 years without it working at all. Nowadays, actually, when you show someone you've got a switch that's been running for 12 years without firmware patch, your CISO or security team is gonna freak out, because that is a massive vulnerability to a network. So to do an upgrade on a Meraki network, it's a question of coming into here. Now I've got wireless. I can filter this by security appliance, for example. I can click on this one here. I click schedule upgrade. I choose the latest stable. I go next. I set my maintenance window. Normally you do this after hours because it does cause the device to restart. And I hit save. That is all you need to do a firmware upgrade on a Meraki device or on a hosted devices. It's as simple as that. Click of a few buttons and off you go. I'll pause there because we've got some sensor and IoT things to show you which are not related to security, in case there's any questions around security specifically to cover.
I don't think anything has come in, unless, James, you see any other questions.
No, you've done a great job of answering them in the chat. Thank you, Eric.
Cool. Lovely. I'll move gears then over to the IoT, which is a slightly different topic, but I was aware that was something of interest. If that's good for everyone, I'll move over to that and show that section briefly. I don't use slideware very often. One of the good things about Meraki is the fact we can demo dashboard from pretty much anywhere, provided I've got an internet connection, but I will use 2 bits of slides just to preface how the camera system works. Because again, I can't demo this to you. This is what a traditional camera system looks like. You've got various different components. You've got the camera on the left-hand side. Then you have an NVR or a DVR, which requires storage, which requires patching, which requires maintenance, which requires cost. You then normally have a dedicated PC running a legacy software, which again requires management, requires patching. And if you've got distributed locations and lots of different locations, becomes problematic to manage. So in all, generally with a traditional camera system, they are not particularly friendly to the large number of sites. And there's lots of different components to manage. This is what a Meraki camera system looks like. There is just the camera, there is just dashboard. It is as simple as that. If you're on site, the camera is intelligent enough to stream the footage to you. You still log into the Meraki dashboard, but it's streamed directly to you. If you're offsite, the camera is streaming the footage through the dashboard to you, so it does increase bandwidth costs or consumption. Each camera has a solid state encrypted disk. There are different sized disks for different areas and depending upon your retention needs. And there's lots of different tools built into cameras to extend the life of the storage based upon your needs. It is fully encrypted end to end. So traditional systems, you might be using unencrypted traffic flows to transfer the video footage to the encoder. With Meraki, it's encrypted at rest, it's encrypted at motion. So it is, from one perspective, the most secure video storage solution around because of the fact it is encrypted fully from end to end, unlike traditional systems. What that looks like in the dashboard itself is a couple of different things. So I've gone to our demo network, London IoT, and I'm showing you a fisheye camera, which looks a bit odd from this view, but one of the things you can do with this is DPTZ. And one of the party pieces of this camera is if you have a VR headset, you can actually connect this to this, and then you can put it on and look around. Now, this might sound like a bit of a gimmick, but a real life example I can give you of this in a retail sector in Texas, where you have a retail manager that's got 500 locations in a state that's almost the size of the UK, and they have to go and visibly check how the stores are set up. Now this person can go to this and have a look at exactly what's going on inside there. So again, for you, in your organization, I've been talking to different humanitarian sectors around in camps and mission critical areas where you need to be able to keep an eye on what's going on remotely, you can do so. And the cameras are doing more than just physical security. There's the analytics piece. And what I mean by that is these cameras, you can create line counting. And I can select the area, which direction it's going. And I can modify this for a specific doorway. Let's zoom things in the way. Just move that. Right, here we go. That's better. Right, so I can tailor this. So I can start to count how many people walk left or right through this area. I can create areas of occupancy to say how long they stay. So 240 seconds in a particular area. The use case I was talking to was for a refugee camp. They wanted to know how many people come in and out of a certain area, how many people are congregating in the canteen area. But you can start to create very interesting analytics, not just for the IT team, but for your operations teams, you can have heat maps. On the physical security side, you can have motion alerts on a specific area. So if you have a doorway where you have a storeroom that's got consumables, there's a comms room where your IT equipment is, you want to know when somebody's going in there, you can create a zone and you can also detect on when people come in. So that's just a quick snapshot of the cameras. On the sensor piece, we're moving away from the networking side of the house into physical attributes of the building. And this opens up a conversation where you as the IT team can go to operations, building facilities management, anyone where that information is useful, and you can become more of a stakeholder in the organization because you can drive certain outcomes for the business. And what I mean by that is on this one here, you can tie it to a camera, and this is just a temperature and humidity sensor. There's an open and closed door sensor. So what you can do is have an open and closed door sensor, a camera pointed, and anytime the door opens and closes, it triggers an alarm on the sensor, and you get a timestamp to the video footage, and you can view that from anywhere. We have a power sensor. So what you're seeing now is an MT40, which is a power sensor connected to one of our WebEx presentation boards, showing me the power consumption. This is in US costings, but what you can do in UK and Europe is you just look at how much CO2 is consumed or by how many watts is consumed, and you can work out what your electricity consumption is. We can see things such as current, voltage, and power factor. And if you've ever had the fun and games of telling someone just turn it on and off again, and you're on one side of a country and the printer's on the other side of the country, you now have the ability to power cycle devices connected to this. I think it supports 3000 watts, so there's nothing to stop you having an extension plug connected to the power sensor, and be able to power cycle everything on that gangway plug effectively. And then air quality, this is the MT15, a different sensor showing air quality. And this opens up different conversations. This sensor has an LED light on the front of it. So in a classroom setting or somewhere where you don't want the technical people to access dashboard, you can have that LED light change color based upon one of these metrics. So for example, TVOC has been reading really high, total volatile organic compounds, for example, and you can have the LED light on the front of it physically change button. CO2 in education is really prevalent for concentration. Noise is noise, that's kind of self-explanatory on that one. Humidity in a kind of networking equipment or servers, that's not great for durability and component failure. And the example I've got from this is we put these sensors into a pilot for a customer, and their air conditioning system was saying one thing and our sensors were saying another thing. So they thought that our sensors were wrong. We had Meraki support check the sensors. No, they're working perfectly fine. So then the question is, why are we getting one reading from this and another reading from the building management system? We asked the question, when was the last time the air conditioning unit was serviced? It's never been serviced. It's been there like that. So our sensors provided the ability to actually get an accurate reading, which then identified that the building management system had never been maintained. And whilst it thought it was working efficiently, it wasn't. It was pumping a lot of humidity into the building. That cost electricity. That also cost damage to the devices. So that's a real life example of how the sensors have been used. And there are many different scenarios in humanitarian or in charity sectors where this is relevant to you as well. So that, conscientious of time, I've overrun slightly, but that's the sensor portfolio in a quick snapshot.
That is brilliant. Thank you so much, John Henry. As far as I'm aware, we've answered all of the questions. And yeah, just conscious that we are at time now. So thank you everyone so far for attending. If you do have more questions, please feel free to get in contact with us. I'll put the details in the chat in a second. And I will also just send a link to the Cisco donation platform. So those are the piece of hardware available through the charity digital exchange. And so yeah, you can either just get in contact with our customer services, or you can set up a consultation with our sort of in-house expert. So all those links are in the chat now. And yeah, just a reminder, if you could give us, 2 minutes of your time just to give us a bit of feedback of this session and let us know what you thought. We'd love to hear your opinion, just so we can keep producing sessions like these to help the sector. So thank you again to everyone who's attended and to our speakers. That was really, really interesting. So thank you so much. Yeah, we'll call time there. Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.